In this installment, Dennis Daoust is being interviewed by Deborah Watkins on the topic of a new era in building telecom services.
Dennis, what's the new era of building telecom services?
The new era of building telecom services has come in two phases. The first phase began in 1999 when the CRTC opened up competition in the telecom industry by mandating that incumbent providers, commonly called telcos, Bell, Telus, and Rogers, as well as Shaw, lease network lines to new participants in the industry. New telcos began approaching building owners asking to install their equipment and cable. Building owners woke up to the fact that riser space and equipment space had value. If a telco wanted access to the building to generate revenue from new customers, they should be willing to pay for the access rights. The building owners also woke up to the fact that the incumbent telcos over the years had left a lot of old, obsolete cable and equipment in their buildings, and the equipment rooms and the riser spaces were crowded and chaotic.
How did our firm get involved in the new era?
Well, we were asked by our clients to develop access agreements to address the issues. We developed an agreement, they often refer to it as a point of presence or a POP agreement, to provide for access fees and also to deal with the management, safety, insurance, and operational issues. But when the telcos learned that access fees were going to reflect revenue potential, they complained to the CRTC. And the CRTC responded by imposing guidelines that limited access fees to the market rental value of building storage or equipment area space and nothing else. Except that if building owners had to incur costs to alter or improve components of their buildings to accommodate the telcos, those costs were fair game to pass along, subject to certain restrictions. POP agreements now provide for only minimal access fees, but they include comprehensive provisions to deal with insurance, risk management, and operational issues.
Dennis, you mentioned that the new era has two phases. What's the second phase?
There are two areas involved in Phase 2. The first is concerned with due diligence, and the second is 5G technology and fiber networks. Dealing first with the due diligence aspect, despite what is provided in those access agreements, in many cases, telcos have been left largely unsupervised. Many equipment rooms are overcrowded and unsafe. Building owners need to get on top of the problem. Companies like TI Infrastructure, the Attain Group, Antenna Management Corp., and RICOM offer inspections, and they submit reports with recommendations to deal with safety and overcrowding issues. Those companies should be brought in to report and supervise the cleanup.
What about the second area, 5G technology and fiber?
5G technology is exciting. It provides enhanced speed and accuracy in transmission of data. Also, the existing 4G technology is approaching its maximum capacity, and before long it'll become less reliable. It's critical for owners to have 5G technology in their buildings. 5G installations are dependent on fiber networks, so buildings need to be equipped with fiber cable. A second aspect associated with fiber is that it's essential for smart building features such as automatic HVAC controls, security, lighting, and communications, which reduce operating costs and enhance building operations. To attract competitive rental rates, building owners will need to factor in the costs of providing fiber to facilitate 5G service and smart building features.
Is there any way for building owners to minimize those costs?
Well, it is interesting that providers seem willing to install fiber and 5G equipment at their cost.
That seems like a great benefit. Are there any drawbacks?
Yes, there are. The difficulty for building owners is that once a provider installs the fiber and 5G equipment, it's in a position to sign up the tenants of the building before any of their competitors can establish a presence in the building. The result is that competitors have no incentive to pay the cost of installing their own fiber and equipment. Tenants are effectively limited. They don't have the ability to get service from their chosen providers. A second problem is that although the provider that installs fiber for its 5G installation will generally make it available to the building owner to allow it to include smart building features, the building owner will be required to pay dearly every time it wants to add a smart building feature. Because of those two problems, building owners may find that they're forced into installing their own fiber systems and their own 5G operating equipment. Fortunately, in many cases, the costs may be recoverable from the tenants of the building because the definition of recoverable operating costs in triple net leases allows the recovery of costs for installing improvements that reduce operating costs or provide operating efficiencies.
How does all this affect the negotiation of leases with building tenants?
It should have a big impact. Commercial landlords and tenants have traditionally negotiated leases with a focus on the physical location, size, parking, elevators, and loading, as well as other amenities in the building. In the new era, the ability to communicate effectively and quickly is paramount. The pandemic underlined that need. Data access and reliability is now more important than many other building features. In recent years, buildings have been rated according to LEED standards. That's L-E-E-D. LEED standards measure energy efficiency and environmental impacts. It's interesting that in the U.S. and several other countries, including Canada, buildings are now being rated under a wired score standard. It measures the quality and reliability of building connectivity and telecommunication services. A building's wired score is going to be increasingly important. Specific clauses pertaining to the building's wired score rating and requiring the provision or maintenance of 5G and ultimately 6G and 7G service will need to be considered, along with a number of other related clauses dealing with reliability and interruption of services, the costs of installing and operating and supplementing fiber and 5G technology, and the ability of the tenant to be serviced by the telco of its choice. Also, when landlords and tenants negotiate rent based on market rent, they would be wise to consider including in their determination of market value the absence or presence of 5G service, whether the building is equipped with smart building services, and whether the building is certified under wired score. At this point, it's estimated that those features can impact market rent by as much as 15%, and going forward, the impact is likely to increase.
Thanks, Dennis. So the bottom line is landlords and tenants need to adjust their focus to include connectivity and telecommunication issues. Space is less valuable if it isn't served with fast, accurate data and communication capabilities.
That's exactly right, Deborah.
That was Dennis Daoust in conversation with Deborah Watkins on the topic of a new era in building telecom services. If you would like to learn more, contact Dennis on our website, dv-law.com.
This audio recording was a general discussion and should not be relied upon as legal advice.